Welcome to the Animal Wellness Podcast, all about improving the lives of animals with better policies and practices in government and business. Brought to you by Animal Wellness Action, where we believe helping animals helps us all. Here's your host, Joseph Grove.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Joseph Grove. Today, we'll be doing a deep dive into what the election that just happened means for animals in 2025. Now, if you're like me, you've heard a ton of coverage about the election. Opinions, predictions, gloom and doom, shouts of euphoria. But what I haven't heard, and what I hope you'll hear from us today, is what does the election mean for animals? We've got a new Congress starting in January. We've got a new administration. The balance of power has shifted. It is a radically different landscape for animals in 2025 than it has been for the last 2 and even the last 4 years. There's no one better. Sincerely, he's my boss. I'd say it if he weren't, than Wayne Pacelle to help us understand what the election results mean for animals. Wayne has been on the Hill, state houses, city houses, outhouses. He's been everywhere throughout his decades-long career fighting for animals. So his context, his experience will be able to help us understand what to expect over the next 4 years. So, Wayne, glad to have you back on the show. It's been a while.
Yes, I'm glad to be with you, Joseph. Thank you so much for having me on about this broad and important topic.
All right. Well, no, excellent. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I know you were very busy over the last couple of months. Animal Wellness Action issued a large number of endorsements. I've been with you for a few years. It's the largest number of endorsements I've seen us put out. We'll talk about those. I know also 24 was a huge year for you in Colorado as you and the team worked mightily to get Proposition 127, the anti-trophy hunting ballot measure, passed in Colorado. We'll talk about that experience. And then certainly what you foresee happening with the new Trump appointees for his cabinet picks and et cetera. But before we get into that, help us understand the background, Wayne, of the last 4 years for animals, the Biden administration, the last Congress. What's been the political landscape recently for animals?
Well, Joseph, the Congress is elected in November of an even year, and then there's a 2-year session. So right now we're at the tail end of the 118th Congress. We're in the second year of the 2-year Congress. And of course, preceding that, logically, was the 117th Congress. And Biden came in November. He was elected in November 2020. He was inaugurated in January 2021, and that really began the 117th Congress with Democrat majorities in both the House and the Senate, but narrow majorities. I would say the word for the 117th Congress for animals was progress. We worked to engineer the passage of 5 major new national policies for animal protection. Leading the way was the FDA Modernization Act 2.0, which eliminated an animal testing mandate that had been in place for 84 years for all new drug screening protocols. And about 75% by some of our estimates of all animal testing is related to drug testing. So it's an enormously important category. There was also a second bill to reduce animal testing that passed. There were a couple of super important wildlife issues. Those were the Big Cat Public Safety Act to cement the prohibition on the trade in big cats as pets, but also very, very importantly, to stop breeding of big cats at roadside menageries where they're used in cub petting, and then they're used for just a short period of time, before they get too big and dangerous, and then they are thrown into the exotic animal trade, and that never turns out well for those animals. The other big policy was a ban on the trade in shark fins, an enormous global industry killing sharks for their fins, for soup, essentially, in some cuisines around the world. And those were great policies. So that ended, and we got a lot of those policies done right at the very end of the 117th Congress. That was December 2022. We're now looking to get into December 2024. This is the tail end of the 118th Congress. And I'd say the word for this Congress has been stasis. We have fended off a number of bad, adverse things like efforts to delist wolves. And we have also not seen any significant animal welfare measures get over the finish line. And that's very disappointing to me because the reforms that we are advancing at Animal Wellness Action and then secondarily at the Center for Humane Economy are mainstream bipartisan reforms. There's absolutely no reason that this Congress should not pass the FIGHT Act to crack down on dogfighting and cockfighting, to add new tools for enforcement. We have 750 endorsing organizations, not just AWA in the center, but the National Sheriff's Association, the National District Attorneys Association, 350 other law enforcement agencies. We have the American Gaming Association that represents all the major casinos in the United States. We have the United Egg Producers, which represents 95% of the egg industry, which is concerned about trafficking of fighting birds and the diseases that they can spread to commercial poultry production. No reason that this bill, which has more bipartisan support than any of the 70 or so animal welfare bills in the Congress, should not get done at the end of the year. But we've got a divided Congress. We've got the Democrats in very, very narrow control in the Senate, and then the Republicans with very narrow control in the House. To me, that divided government often works out well for animals, but we've had just a couple of stubborn-minded committee chairs in the House that have impeded the progress of mainstream sensible animal welfare reforms. I think it's terrible. These folks are not being fair. They are not paying attention to the values of Americans, and they are thwarting efforts to reform some of the most abject forms of cruelty that exist in our society. So, Joseph, we're not done. We've got 3 weeks left in this Congress, and as I mentioned, in the prior Congress, the 117th, 2 years ago, that's when we got most of the 5 major reforms that we pushed over the finish line. So I'm holding out hope. I do think that the Farm Bill, which is a major agriculture and food-related omnibus bill, just is kind of a grab bag of items that relate to food policy and agriculture policy, but historically, it's a bill that we have worked very hard on at Animal Wellness Action. I've worked hard for 2 decades to add animal welfare provisions because the USDA, which kind of falls under the jurisdiction of the Ag Committee, and therefore the Farm Bill touches many programs at USDA, that bill has historically been an important one to add important animal welfare reforms. For instance, in the 116th Congress, at the end of 2018, we passed a bill to ban the trade in dog and cat meat. And we also passed a very consequential bill to ban all animal fighting across the United States. And the major effect was to outlaw animal fighting in Puerto Rico and Guam, the other U.S. territories, which were huge hotspots for animal fighting. So those were 2 of the 3 key reforms we got done on the last Farm Bill. But that Farm Bill was supposed to be done in the 118th Congress. That's 2023, 2024. It looks like they just couldn't get their act together. There were too many divisions between Democrats and Republicans on the agriculture committees. And they pushed the issue, or they will push the issue, into the 119th Congress, which will also be a very close Congress in terms of the ratio of Republicans to Democrats. But importantly, the Republicans took control of the chamber. They will have a 53 to 47 majority in terms of the working members and how the members organize themselves. There are 2 independents in the Senate, Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont and Senator Angus King of Maine, and they caucus with the Democrats. So the 45 Democrats plus the 2 independents make up the 47. And then the 53 Republicans will now be in charge. The House is going to look very similar. It may look exactly the same in terms of the ratio. It will, in all likelihood, be 221 for the Republicans to 214, which means that the Republicans can only lose 3 votes if there's a party line vote. And it may be 220 to 215. There are a couple of races outstanding. It looks to me that of the 3 races that are outstanding, one is going to go to a Republican, Representative Miller Meeks of Iowa. And then a second race is going to go to Derek Tran, a Democrat in Orange County, California. And the third race is still a jump ball. And that is Adam Gray seeking to oust incumbent Republican John Duarte. So depending on how the Duarte-Gray race goes, the Democrats will pick up 1 seat or they'll maintain the precise ratio that held in the 118th Congress, the 2023-24 period.
You just mentioned the Duarte race. I know that is one in which we've invested some energy. Talk about why that's so important to Animal Wellness Action.
Well, Animal Wellness Action seeks to promote policies to stop cruelty to animals and then to enforce those laws. But it also, as a 501c4 organization, can get involved in elections. That's issue elections like ballot measures or candidate elections like House races, like the Adam Gray, John Duarte race in California's 13th congressional district. Duarte is a first-term Republican from the Modesto area in the northern Central Valley. And Adam Gray is a former California Assembly member who faced off against Duarte last election, so in November 2022, and he lost to Duarte by 534 votes. So right now, the difference is about 200. And we actively have supported Adam Gray, the Democrat, over John Duarte because John Duarte co-sponsored the EATS Act to overturn a statewide ballot initiative in his own state that is being promoted by Smithfield Foods, which is controlled by the Chinese Communist government, and that would unwind Prop 12. And this is especially bad for California farmers because Prop 12 was a follow-up to Prop 2, which I had worked on in 2007 and 2008 that also passed. That measure had a 5 or 6 year phase out for extreme confinement of animals on factory farms. So it dealt with veal crates, gestation crates for pigs, and then battery cages for laying hens. So California farmers, many of whom opposed the original Prop 2, complied with the law. And they made important investments, invested hundreds of millions of dollars over the last, 10 to 15 years to have more extensive systems to give the animals more space. So cage-free production for laying hens, crate-free production for sows who are used in the pig industry. So Duarte, by supporting the EATS Act, is threatening to gut the work of the California farmers who all of them have come into compliance with the law. And if Prop 12 gets undercut, you'll see cheap battery cage eggs from Iowa or Mexico coming into California to undercut the work of California farmers. They will cut corners by not having any animal welfare standards. They will have, waste policies that will pollute rivers. They'll have overcrowding of animals that can lead to disease. All of those things are ultimately passed on to society in the form of illness and cleanup costs. And obviously the animal cruelty piece is an intangible. I just think it's outrageous that Duarte is undercutting his own farmers. So we worked with our team in the Central Valley, and we did a series of advertising efforts to alert the electorate in the 13th district that Duarte didn't support one of the 70 animal welfare bills in the Congress. There were a couple of votes that came to the floor. He voted for the anti-animal position, but most importantly, He was one of the very few Californians who supports and co-sponsored the EATS Act to hurt California farmers, to hurt California animals, and to unwind basically a Supreme Court ruling that a conservative court had judged to be a proper exercise of state authority. The U.S. Supreme Court, in an important ruling, NPPC v. Ross. NPPC is National Pork Producers Council, which is the factory farming trade association based in Iowa. They challenged California's law as a sort of overreach in terms of what's called the Dormant Commerce Clause. They lost. They lost in front of a conservative Supreme Court. Conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote the majority opinion with Amy Coney Barrett and Clarence Thomas, and then two of the liberal Supreme Court justices siding with them. And this is an outrageous maneuver by factory farming interests to subvert states' rights. And they're doing it mainly on behalf of Smithfield Foods, which in 2013 was purchased by the Chinese Communist government. And, I just find it unconscionable that we're even having this debate in the Congress. So hopefully Adam Gray will overtake John Duarte. And if John Duarte serves, I hope that this near-death experience in terms of his political future causes him to reassess his position on animal welfare, causes him to reassess his position as an ally of China rather than American farmers and California voters who overwhelmingly favored Proposition 12 in November 2018.
Right. Thank you, Wayne. We'll come back to some of the other races where we had a stronger stake, but I want to go back to the outgoing administration for a moment, because, of course, with a new administration comes a host of new political appointees. And I don't think I'm inaccurate in judging some of our feelings about some of Biden's appointees as complicated. Tom Vilsack at Agriculture, Deb Haaland at Interior. We have not found, despite what one might expect from a liberal administration, a great deal of support for animals and the positions that would benefit them. Am I accurate in saying that?
The Biden administration was awful for animals. There are no ifs, ands, or buts related to it. And the two key agencies are Agriculture and Interior. You had Tom Vilsack and Deborah Haaland, and they basically did nothing original, nothing new that was good. Vilsack followed up on two areas where he failed in his prior service to agriculture during the Obama years. He bollocksed an anti-horse soring rule, waited to the very end to address it, this awful practice of horse soring where Tennessee walking horses have their feet injured by mechanical or chemical means. That rule had been kicking around for a while. He waited until the very end, and it didn't even get properly published in the Federal Register. He tried to get it done on January 19th, basically, right before the Obama administration was turning into the Trump administration. And then he also bollocksed the organic livestock and poultry standards, which were the first set of proposed farm animal welfare standards that say that if you are raising a pig for food, that the animal can't be in a gestation crate. And then there were a whole set of other metrics on animal welfare. So Vilsack, again, to his mild credit, did finish up those efforts in this Congress, but those were issues that he should have dealt with previously. And these were makeups. There was nothing new, nothing original, nothing pro-animal that came out of USDA. They ignored the mink farming crisis as we saw COVID, course across the human population. There was a parallel outbreak in mink. Those animals were clustered on factory farms. Many of the animals, millions of them, got sick and were killed by governments like Denmark, the number one mink farming country in the world, killed all 17 million mink because the outbreak in the mink was so severe and the virus was mutating and actually got transferred from from humans to the mink, and then the mink spilled it back over to people. We have a detailed report by Dr. Jim Keene, who is a vet and also a PhD infectious disease expert, that documented this. The administration did nothing to address this ongoing zoonotic disease crisis on our mink farms. It failed in a whole host of other areas. The Vilsack came out for overturning Prop 12 before the Supreme Court. The Solicitor General, who is a political appointee, working essentially in this case for the Ag Department and to some degree the Justice Department, they favored and argued in front of the Supreme Court to overturn California's Prop 12. I mean, absolutely, utterly outrageous. In terms of Interior, a set of additionally outrageous policies. The Interior Department has proposed the biggest raptor kill in the history of the United States. 450,000 plus barred owls will be shot starting in the spring of 2025, unless we can stop it. We are working very hard to stop it. And Interior has been rounding up wild horses and burros from our western rangelands, BLM land principally, at a breakneck pace, spending millions and millions of taxpayer dollars to round them up and then put them in long-term holding facilities where we're paying for their long-term care. We now have more than 50,000 wild horses in captive holding facilities. They petered out on stopping lead ammunition on national wildlife refuges. We know there are 500 studies that show the toxic effects of lead on more than 120 species of wildlife. We saw in 2022 an incredible report come out of Science, the respected science journal, about lead toxicity in bald and golden eagles, that half of the bald and golden eagles in a continent-wide sample of their population showed highly toxic effects of lead in their systems, because when lead is dispersed through hunting, it then goes up the trophic system, and the eagles are dying in substantial numbers, and many of them are right on the edge. It's a terrible way to die, through plumbism, which is lead poisoning. And the administration, has promoted the delisting of wolves. We had to beat them in court on that. So this Biden administration, I really can't think of almost anything novel and good that it did, but I can sure give you a long list of demerits. So I knew President Biden. I worked with him in the Senate. He had a good record. I wouldn't say a super distinguished record, but he had a good record. It just didn't translate into his presidency. I think he didn't have the time or energy to give direction to Vilsack and Holland on animal welfare and wildlife protection. And they just stayed with the normal course. They were aligned with the factory farming lobby. They were aligned with the trophy hunting lobby. And they just made all sorts of decisions to reflect that allegiance. And it was certainly a bitter disappointment to me.
And that was certainly the sense I got. And he didn't give German Shepherds a great name either by letting his dog eat half of the Secret Service assigned to the White House. So we'll add that to our list. All right.
And Joseph, let me just say on that, before the election, he adopted a dog, and, he was pictured with a dog. That's great. I'm all for it. I love adoption. I've promoted it throughout my entire career, but that's not a sufficient record of action. Your personal decision on where you obtain a dog is not the measure of your presidency. You have major national policies that affect billions of animals, and how you handle agriculture policy, and how you handle wildlife policy, and how you handle USDA's predator control program, and how you handle attack on states' rights that's led by factory farm oriented lawmakers. Those are the measures of how you have performed on animal welfare, not whether you adopt a dog. I'm all for it. It was a good move to adopt the dog, but it is insufficient alone. We have to think more broadly about issues, and more broadly means looking at the biggest categories of animal use. And having responsible policies, like no gestation crates. I mean, animals built to move should be allowed to move. That should unite animal welfare advocates and farmers. Most farmers recognize and understand animals, and animals need to be able to move. It's only in this dystopian world of factory farming where it is acceptable to people to immobilize animals for the short life that they have on this planet. And I just find it so disappointing that the Biden administration just failed. And I was hollering from the rooftops about this. I was going to the White House and talking to people and saying, what are you guys doing? We've got a country of animal lovers here. They're concerned about these problems and you should be acting. And, there just wasn't action.
Animal wellness action depends on people like you to complete our work. Our recent victories to protect big cats, spare beagles from pharmaceutical tests, and convince Nike to stop killing kangaroos for shoes would not have happened without the financial support of our donors. Become one at any amount. Visit animalwellnessaction.org/donate to join our fight against animal cruelty of all kinds. That's animalwellnessaction.org/donate.
I'm going to, Wayne, name a few folks who are appointed, nominated by Trump for his new administration. And I'm going to ask you to kind of respond to what you may expect from them as we go forward relative to our issues. And the first would be probably the best known of the four, RFK, Mr. Kennedy, coming into Health and Human Services. And I know that we work a lot on FDA modernization. What's your hope and expectation there?
Well, I'm excited about the prospect of Bobby Kennedy being confirmed. I think it's a very, very startling selection for a lot of Americans, and I understand why. But Bobby Kennedy, has worked on food policy issues, and within the portfolio of the Secretary of Health and Human Services is the FDA. That stands for Food and Drug Administration, and I think the FDA has just been a terrible agency. I've been so disappointed seeing it up close in our work on the FDA Modernization Act and the intransigence of the agency in holding on to animal testing when the data show that the animal tests are not predictive of the human reaction to drugs, that in 90 to 95% of cases, when a drug passes muster in extensive multi-species animal tests, it then does not translate when we go to human clinical trials, and the drugs then fail, and the drug developer, whether it's a pharmaceutical company or an academic researcher, has to start anew. The animal tests have retarded our progress on drug development. And it has become so expensive, with the average cost of a drug being $2.2 billion from concept development to it hitting the market, that the drug companies can only go for home run drugs like Ozempic. That's great, but there are 7,000 diseases total, and there are rare and minor diseases that afflict not some small number of people. And the drug companies, really have such a barrier to entry because of these immense R&D costs. They can't recoup the money if they go for drugs that affect a smaller pool of patients. And the animal testing is at the heart of this problem because it's so inefficient. So that has been a big touch for me with FDA, which has been lagging very badly, irresponsibly badly, in implementing the FDA Modernization Act 2.0, which passed with enormous bipartisan support in both chambers of Congress. The FDA has not even rewritten the regulations, which it took one of our interns about an hour to do. It was just a definition change, just had to swap out animal testing for non-clinical testing in about 28 places in the regulations. And FDA hasn't even done that. It wants 5 years to make this change. I mean, it's laughable, Joseph. It's absolutely laughable. But the other part of the portfolio, other than the drugs, is the food. And the food, FDA hasn't done much in the space. And Bobby Kennedy, comes in with a promise to, look at our food system and think about healthier foods. And it it agitates and excites a lot of people on the left to even, use his name. But this is a guy who took on the pork industry and Smithfield Foods, and he has a record on these issues. I hope that he follows through. I hope that Trump allows him the latitude to take decisive action to make our food system better. I hope and I trust that any logical, review of our drug policy would show that the animal testing is not an effective way to advance as a core strategy. We need to move toward human-based biology. So I'm hopeful about Kennedy. I know that many organizations that I talk to and work with have a different view of him, but a conventional pick from big pharma would not have offered us the prospect of reform in some of these areas. So I'm hopeful, but it's the old notion of trust but verify. But it's an exciting pick from my seat. But we'll see if that promise is upheld. I certainly hope that it is.
He may actually be impactful on another one of our campaigns, and that is the Add Soy Act, where we would, the government would reimburse school systems for providing soy milk in addition to dairy. Right now, there's only the reimbursement for dairy. Soy is not covered by the school lunch program, so he may even be impactful on that front, I would guess.
We've got an overdue federal policy to bring choice to the National School Lunch Program. Right now, the milk industry has a monopoly, a mandate that every one of the 30 million kids in the National School Lunch Program gets a carton of milk on his or her tray. This is the case, even though perhaps 15 of the 30 million kids are lactose intolerant. We need to give kids choice. And these are good, wholesome agricultural products. Soy milk is recognized under the dietary guidelines for Americans as nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk. There's no reason that kids should be forced to take a product that makes them sick. And the fact that, again, we're having a debate about this is almost incredible. It just reflects the power of the dairy industry. It does not reflect any logical discussion about these issues. A logical discussion would mean that the dairy industry would continue to have an option to provide cow's milk to kids, but that kids would also get soy milk and in the future, other plant-based milks that are nutritionally equivalent and give them all the nutrients and protein that they need.
Thank you for that, Wayne. So let's then talk about the Department of Agriculture. Brooke Rollins, what do you expect there?
Just don't know at this point. She is not someone who has had a lot of touches with U.S. agriculture or animal welfare policy. So I think we wait and see, and hopefully she gets questioned at her confirmation hearing about animal welfare, and we hope to hear that she'll be committed to animal welfare.
Pam Bondi, Attorney General. I know the Animal Cruelty Enforcement Act is high on our radar. Talk about Pam Bondi.
Well, I'm very excited about Pam Bondi as the nominee for United States Attorney General. When she was the Florida Attorney General, she worked with me and with Grade 2K USA, our partner, to get the ban on greyhound racing on the Florida ballot. Every 20 years, there's something called the Constitutional Revision Commission, which puts issues on the ballot for a vote of the people to amend the Constitution. And we had been working for years, and Grade 2K had really been in the forefront of this to end greyhound racing in its redoubt, which is Florida. At the time, 12 of the 18 tracks in the United States, this was 2018, were operating in Florida. Thanks to Pam, it got on the ballot. She was an advocate for it, as were we. It passed with 69% of the vote, a startlingly high number, surprised a lot of people. Pam has also been a staunch advocate of proper enforcement of our anti-cruelty laws, animal fighting. I'm very hopeful that she'll create an animal cruelty and crimes section at the Department of Justice. It's an aspiration that we've had that no prior administration has taken up with force. And it's time for dedicated enforcement of our animal welfare and anti-cruelty laws. We have enough of them now to warrant dedicated personnel. And these matters are not just about cruelty to animals, but we know that malicious cruelty to animals is also a precursor to human-on-human violence. The people involved in dogfighting and cockfighting and other crimes of malice toward animals are a threat in the home. There's domestic violence that people involved in these terrible activities perpetrate. They spill out into our communities. We've had mass shootings at dogfights and cockfights. We've had cartels tied in with dogfighting and cockfighting, especially cockfighting. We see all sorts of zoonotic disease problems with cockfighting. So these are not small matters, and dedicated enforcement makes perfect sense for us to make our nation safer. So I'm very enthused about Pam Bondi for Attorney General.
Going back to the barred owl issue, lead, wild horses, what can we expect from Doug Burgum coming into Interior?
I am not optimistic about lead ammo and how the Republicans handle that issue. The NRA and the National Shooting Sports Foundation have too much influence with too many Republicans. And when Trump took over last time, his team at Interior immediately nixed U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service director's order to phase out lead ammo on our national wildlife refuges over 5 years. So I'm not hopeful about that. Doug Burgum, the North Dakota governor who's been nominated to be Interior Secretary, he actually was very outspoken to protect the wild horses at Theodore Roosevelt National Park. And he, with the congressional delegation of North Dakota, along with us and some great advocates in North Dakota, succeeded in getting the National Park Service to abandon its plans to round up and remove many of these iconic wild horses who are an incredible tourist draw in Western North Dakota. They're part of the gateway economies that are very, very important in a very rural part of the state and the country. So I'm hopeful about that. And I'm very hopeful that he'll engage with us on the broader issue of wild horse and burro protection, ending these roundups that cost tens of millions of dollars. The long-term care, once they're rounded up, is immensely expensive. The United States is basically running the biggest horse, holding facility in the world, with more than 50,000 wild horses and burros. And they've exceeded the capacity of the adoption program to offset those roundups and removals and the long-term holding of these animals. So we'll see, but I'm hopeful about that piece of the Interior equation, and I'm less hopeful about wolves. I think we're going to have a real fight on our hands to continue to protect wolves. I would hope that the Interior Department would come out in favor of the Snowmobiles Aren't Weapons Act, the SAW Act, to forbid running over wolves and coyotes and perhaps other animals with snowmobiles and other motorized vehicles just for the thrill of it, or really for malice. So these are important policies. We have a federal Airborne Hunting Act that forbids the use of aircraft to chase down animals for the thrill of it. And we should have a similar policy for ground-based vehicles. We should not allow animals to be chased, run over, run down. And the case in Wyoming of a man running down a wolf and injuring her and then bringing her to a bar to taunt her and to show off his cruelty, still is burned into my brain, and I know it's burned into the brains of millions of Americans and Wyomingites who consider this unconscionable.
And very soon we'll have on animalwellnessaction.org registration information for a webinar we're hosting in December that will update folks on that case, Cody Roberts, Wyoming, and then also get into the details of this new legislation we're supporting, the Snowmobiles Aren't Weapons Act. So thanks for teeing that up. Wayne, let's move from the national level to Colorado. I got to see, working with you firsthand, what it takes to champion a ballot measure. We had one in Colorado. It didn't go the way we wanted, obviously, but I think if I understand correctly from you and other leaders of the campaign, we have other paths maybe to get to the same result. Tell us about Prop 127 in Colorado.
Prop 127 was a ballot measure that we at Animal Wellness Action and the Center for Humane Economy, crafted with a really great set of Colorado-based advocates to stop the trophy hunting and commercial trapping of the native cats of Colorado. That's mountain lions, bobcats, and lynx. And each year, trophy hunters, almost exclusively using packs of dogs, most of them owned by hunting guides, who basically rent them out, $8,500 a pop to basically get a guaranteed kill of a lion. They chase them with packs of dogs, use GPS equipment, drive them up a tree, and shoot them out of a tree for no reason really other than to claim the trophy. And some of these people claim they eat the meat, but that is at best a tertiary or lower level objective. It's about showing dominance. It's about getting a trophy. And these animals are vital to Colorado ecosystems. They are the one major antidote to the spread of chronic wasting disease, which the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, or specifically its antecedent, the Division of Wildlife, helped set loose at Colorado State University in the late 1960s. They let loose this terrible scourge by mixing scrapie infected sheep with healthy mule deer, and this prion jumped essentially from the sheep into the mule deer, and that has launched CWD, which is an always fatal neurological brain wasting disorder that's now in 34 states and Canadian provinces, and it's acute in Colorado. But what's amazing is where there are no lions, the incidence rates of CWD are through the roof. And where there are mountain lions, the rates are very low or non-existent. It's an incredible example of nature's ability to compensate for threats and challenges that exist, and the predation that lions exhibit by selectively removing the infected animals is incredible. It's the only answer we've got. The bobcat issue, they're hounded and they're trapped, and there's just no good reason to kill a bobcat. They're not a threat to anybody. They, to a lesser degree, but also to an important degree, are important apex predators that keep nature in balance. And then with Canada lynx, they were reintroduced. They're mistakenly killed by hounds. Hounds don't distinguish between a lion and a bobcat and a lynx if they happen to come across a lynx. The traps don't discriminate. So it was perfectly logical for us to include all of these animals in and to protect the native cats of Colorado. We came up short. It was a surprise to me. I thought we ran a great campaign, but the opponents had a lot of money. They told tall tales. They tried to scare people about mountain lions. They made fanciful economic arguments about the value of lion hunting, which is just a pittance in the overall matrix of funding for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. They completely ignore the remarkable beneficial effect of lions in controlling CWD, which is an existential threat to the future of deer and elk hunting in the state. Some hunting groups have even predicted that we'll see the end of deer and elk hunting in 50 years if CWD continues to advance. And what they're doing is they're impairing the lion's work to stop the progress or progression of CWD by killing 500 lions, perhaps out of 2,500. The state has no idea how many lions there are. And maybe they're killing 20% of them. Of course, that's going to impair their work against CWD. But the whole thing is cruel. Shooting an animal out of a tree is unsporting. It's anti-ecological. And yeah, Joseph, you better believe it, we're not giving up. I worked on a North Dakota anti-cruelty ballot initiative some years ago to make animal cruelty a felony. Most other states had already had it. North Dakota was an outlier. And, the hunting groups and some of the factory farming groups, tried to douse it with water and say, oh, it's written too broadly. It's the same thing they said about this measure. And then lawmakers approved it, just in the next session because they knew the public was not rejecting the reform. They were concerned about things that were said and they wanted to kind of kick the tires with it. And that's what I believe happened here. I think that the Colorado Legislative Council did a really poor job in drafting the summary. They highlighted an unintended effect of the measure in terms of eliminating a compensation program for ranchers who may have lost a lion may have lost a cow to a lion. Only 3 cattle were killed in 2024 in Colorado by lions. I mean, they stay away from people. They stay away from livestock for the most part. So I think that there were some small areas of the ballot language that were exploited by a multi-million-dollar campaign, but I'm committed to doing it. I'm absolutely convinced the public is 90% with us on the Bobcats, and I think that 70% of the public is with us on the Lions. And, this is why change is hard. You don't always get it the first crack. And we are committed at AWA and the center to continue our fight to protect these native cats. Trophy hunting of lions and bobcats with packs of dogs is inconsistent with other standards of hunting big game. You can't allow packs of dogs to corner or chase down an elk or a deer. You can't use that practice with bear hunting. These are relics. The practice of hounding of these animals is a relic of an earlier era of wildlife management when the trophy hunting lobby controlled all the levers of power. And there was an attitude of hatred toward predators and a complete ignorance about their role in the ecosystem. And I think that you saw from the opponents of Prop 127, their hatred of these animals, their ignorance about their ecological role, and their selfish pursuit of mounting a trophy at the expense of the health and vitality of Colorado ecosystems. Chronic wasting disease is the most serious wildlife disease to affect cervids ever. It is rampant in areas where lions don't thrive. And in the areas where lions are present, they're being attacked by these hound hunters, and 500 of them are being removed every year. Of course, that's going to allow CWD to get more of a foothold in the mountain counties where the lions live. And I just want to say, this whole fear-mongering, scaring people about lions, mountain lions do live in urban and suburban Colorado. They don't just live on the western slope. They live in Boulder County. They live in Jefferson County. They live in Larimer County. They live in El Paso County, where Colorado Springs is. People live with these animals. They stay away from us. It's remarkable that these powerful animals have so few encounters with human beings. Trophy hunting, by selectively removing many of the larger animals, because those are the ones that the trophy hunters want, they eye them in a tree and can see if they're a very large animal, although they can't see whether it's a male or a female, so they end up shooting about half of the 500 animals killed are females. Those animals that are dominant and have established territories, when you take them out of the population, it creates social chaos among survivors, leading to animals, experimenting in new areas, maybe juvenile animals who are not skilled at killing traditional prey, and they may be ones that try to take a dog or a sheep. And trophy hunting is not the answer to the very occasional conflicts that exist between lions and people. Trophy hunting exacerbates the problems. The animals are incredible at taking care of themselves and staying away from people. And when we attempt to conduct these large-scale trophy hunting programs, we create more problems for them.
The many people who have followed this campaign through Animal Wellness Action and through the center are elated that the work will go on. Thank you for that. We're running long on time, but I do want to get your review of the other elections where Animal Wellness Action planted very deep stakes. So why don't you, Wayne, give us an overview beyond the Gray and Duarte race, where we have a stake and what your assessment of the results is.
Well, listen, Joseph, we want every federal lawmaker, every state lawmaker to be an ally of animal welfare. These are mainstream sensibilities. cruelty to animals is a vice. It's been codified as a vice and a criminal activity in many states for 150 years. So all we're doing is logically applying anti-cruelty standards at Animal Wellness Action. And that is not a radical exercise. That is a mainstream exercise. It's an exercise of moral consistency in a world where animals are still widely used in extreme ways. So we at Animal Wellness Action don't get involved just in policy, in trying to advance anti-cruelty legal standards, then to enforce those laws, but we also get involved in elections because the composition of a legislative body often determines whether you can get a good policy or not. So we conducted 9 independent expenditure campaigns. This is where we conduct a television campaign or other influencing actions to try to alert voters to anti-animal sensibilities that some candidates may have, or the alternative, to alert them to a keen sensitivity that lawmakers have about animal welfare. So we backed 5 Democrats over Republicans in key races, and we backed 4 Republicans over Democrats on the other side of the partisan divide, if you will. So very balanced from an ideological perspective, 5 and 4. And we helped to oust a representative, Brandon Williams from Syracuse, New York, who had not distinguished himself on animal welfare in any way. His opponent, a Democrat, John Mannion, was a leader on animal welfare in the state Senate. So we helped elect John Mannion to a U.S. House seat in upstate New York. We are poised to see a win. We targeted Republican Representative Michelle Steele in Orange County. She was a 0 on animal welfare issues in the 118th Congress. She had so many opportunities to do good, whether co-sponsoring bills or voting in favor or against bills, depending upon their animal welfare orientation. She never made the right decision. And it looks like Derek Tran is going to overtake her, or has overtaken her. He's now up about 500 votes. We targeted tens of thousands of voters with our anti-cruelty message, and pointed out that Steele was against animal welfare time and again. So those are 2 flips. We defended some of our great Republican leaders from challenges. Brian Fitzpatrick in Pennsylvania 1st District, Bucks County outside of Philadelphia. Nancy Mace, who's in the Charleston and coastal South Carolina area, who's carrying, each of them are carrying 3 or 4 different animal welfare bills. They're incredible leaders. We lost a defense effort with Mike Garcia, who was a strong anti-cruelty advocate. And then we defended David Valadeo, who's been a strong animal welfare advocate from the Central Valley. He's a farmer who strongly opposes the EATS Act, and he's been supportive of our efforts on the FDA Modernization Act and the Animal Cruelty Enforcement Act. So overall, Joseph, I'd say, we're still waiting on the Duarte race. If that race comes through, we will have won 7 of 9 swing seat races where we elevated the animal issues into the election. And that is so important for our cause. The lawmakers are really only going to pay attention if animal issues become an electoral matter. And that's our goal at Animal Wellness Action specifically. The Center for Humane Economy is not involved in candidate elections in any way. It's forbidden to be involved in those efforts, but AWA is in with both feet.
Thank you for listening to the Animal Wellness Podcast. Please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and follow Animal Wellness Action on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. To stay current with all of our news and information, and to take action to help animals, sign up at animalwellnessaction.org. Until next time, remember that helping animals helps us all.